Which prospects might we see in September? Find out next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Saturday, August 26th. I am Frank Samfeld, joined by Scott White, and the 5 prospects on the verge of getting called up. Pete Crow-Armstrong with the Cubs, Ceddane Rafaela with the Red Sox, Heston Kjerstad with the Orioles, Brett Baty with the Mets, and Jordan Lawlar with the D-backs. 2 names on this list, Scott, that we haven't talked about in a while. Do you actually think the Orioles could call up another prospect? It just feels like they've already called up so many. And with Jordan Lawlar, slow start this year, really picked it back up. Do you really think there's a chance we could see him?
I think there's a chance, and I'm taking some big swings here. You introduced it as the 5 on the verge of getting called up, but it's not exactly that. It's, I think, the 5 most worth stashing because of the chance they get called up combined with the impact they'll make if they do. I'm taking some big swings here because we're still kind of in uncharted territory here with the CBA taking effect last year and the draft pick incentives tied to Rookie of the Year finishers. A lot of teams are waiting till late in the current year to call up their top prospects, give them a little exposure so that they're better positioned as rookies to turn in a nice rookie performance. And so I know we were surprised last year by some of the prospects that got called up the last few weeks of the year to get that little bit of exposure. So I'm dreaming big here. I wouldn't say any of these guys are guaranteed to be called up. The one exception is Brett Baty, who of course technically isn't even a prospect anymore. But the Red Sox and Cubs both could use a true standout center fielder. Pete Crow-Armstrong for the Cubs and Ceddane Rafaela for the Red Sox. Both defensive standouts, high energy players, exactly the sort of guys who you like having on your team for the playoff run. It is interesting that the Red Sox passed over Rafaela to call up Wilyer Abreu, particularly when they lost their center fielder. You'd think Rafaela is tailor-made for that. So that is interesting. I don't know that it necessarily precludes them from calling up Rafaela later, but maybe it suggests they don't think he's ready as a hitter. Heston Kjerstad, the reason why I think they could call him up is because Colton Cowser, like if they had an outfield need, they tried Colton Cowser. He hit 115 before getting sent down. And so rather than turning back to him, would they try another outfield bat that seems major league ready, 24-year-old hitting well at AAA? It's possible. I mean, Kjerstad isn't on the 40-man roster yet, so maybe that would have them leaning Cowser. But there's enough of a chance, and I know as a fantasy player, I would rather see Kjerstad after the way Cowser's first look in the majors went. And Lawlar is the biggest reach of all, but the Diamondbacks are getting basically no production from the right side of their infield between Geraldo Perdomo at shortstop. They did recently get Evan Longoria back, maybe can provide something at third base, but I mean, if they're hoping to stay in the playoff race, Lawlar might be exactly the spark they need. And since after that slow start, basically he's hit 300 from June 1st on. So Lawlar looks like he could be make a nice contribution for them.
And we saw the D-backs be pretty aggressive in calling up Corbin Carroll this time last year. So I think it would make some sense, especially again, chasing a wild card spot out there in Arizona. 5 prospects on the periphery. These are players doing something of note as of late. And Lazaro Montes, an outfielder with the Mariners. Jacob Misiorowski, a starting pitcher with the Brewers. Graham Pauley, a third baseman with the Padres. Cole Carrig, an outfielder with the Rockies. And Austin Shenton, a third baseman with the Rays. Any quick thoughts here?
Well, you mentioned Cole Carrig is an outfielder for the Rockies. He's also a catcher and a shortstop. So he's played center field, catcher, and shortstop. What a combination so far. And almost his games have almost been distributed equally between those 3. Very little track record so far. He was drafted just this year, but really interesting player worth keeping an eye on. That's Cole Carrig. Lazaro Montes, I think, is the most attractive name here. There's an easy Jordan Alvarez comp because he's built the same way. He's from Cuba originally. He worked with the same trainer in the Dominican Republic that Alvarez did after leaving Cuba, and lately he's started to provide Alvarez-level power in the minors. He's only 18 years old, very lowest levels of the minors. Obviously, that's a lofty comp, Jordan Alvarez, but Lazaro Montes definitely worth looking into in dynasty leagues.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.